Now the next set of functions that we will see are related to transform. So let me load a file. So in case of transform, we can transform the data. For example, sometimes the data is not in proper order. So in that case, in order to create proper order, you have to perform certain functions. So those functions are available in the transform tab. We shall see that. Okay. So let's load the file from here. On this. Yeah. So the first set of functions that we will see from here is the count row. So let's say I have a list of data and I want to count how many number of rows are there. Now the objective or the reason why we are using this function specifically is your Power Query can only load up to 1000 rows. Okay. If I want to load more than 1000 rows, then that is not possible in Power Query. What happens is when you click on that close and apply button, then the data is then the transformations or the steps that you have written are applied to the rest of the data, and the data is transformed and then it is loaded to your Power BI desktop data tab. Now let's say I have this sheet and I want to count how many number of rows this particular sheet has. So for that I can go to this transform tab and I can click on this count rows. When I click on count rows, it will give me a count showing how many number of rows I have. So as you can see, hello. Is it the same for everyone?
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
Hello. Anurag, Swapnil, Shreya. How's it?
Yes, sir.
Is it audible or is it still disturbing?
Is it now?
Okay. Better now, right?
Yes, better now.
Yeah. So with the help of count rows function, I can actually count how many number of rows I have in my data sheet. And like I said, your Power Query can load up to 1000 rows, that's top 1000 rows specifically.
The voice is not audible now.
Shreya, what about others? Still not audible?
Yeah, audible for me.
Okay. Anurag, Swapnil.
It is audible, sir.
Now audible.
Okay, Atul, your voice is breaking. So maybe try to get into an area where you have network. I think that could be also one of the issues because even I am hearing your voice as breaking. Any other person who is hearing my voice as breaking? Rahul?
No, sir. Your voice is okay.
I think Atul, try to switch to another network, maybe hotspot if your internet is not working. I think that could be one of the issues. Okay.
Sir.
Yeah, now I can hear you. I think it's better now. It's not breaking. Okay, moving on. So this is your count rows function. Okay. So like I said, I'll repeat it again. Your Power Query function, your Power Query editor can load only 1000 rows. That too from the top. So if your data has 10,000 rows, it will only load the 1,000 rows. It will do the profiling based on the 1,000 rows. And when you click on close and apply, then the transformations are applied to the rest of the data. Okay, and then it is loaded in your Power BI desktop. So let's say if you want to count the total number of rows, you have this function, count rows. Count rows will give you the total number of rows present in your table. Okay, similar to this, as I said, your Power Query editor will always load the data from the top. Okay, and it will always try to load the data from the top, and it will only load 1,000 rows, which you can see here, column profiling based on top 1,000 rows. And the number of rows loaded here are 999 plus, meaning 1,000 rows are actually loaded from the top. But let's say if you want to load the data from the bottom, okay, so for that we have another option here called as reverse rows. Okay, when you click on reverse rows, what happens is instead of loading the data from the top, the data is now loaded from the bottom. So if you remember, this particular sheet has 9,994 rows. Before this step was applied, we were actually loading the data from the top. That's why the serial number or row ID was starting from 1. But when you see this now, what is happening here is when I clicked on the reverse rows, now it has loaded the data from the bottom. That is why you see the row ID as 9,994. Clear with this?
Yes.
Yeah, the next function is your transpose function. So usually transpose function is also available in Excel, and you might have used it also. So the job of the transpose function is to convert the rows into columns and columns into rows. So let's say I have this data with me in the vertical order. Okay, so I have one column which is containing the task name. I have the second column which is containing the current action, and I have the third column which is containing the next action. Now, instead of reading this data vertically, I want to convert this data into a horizontal format. So for that, I can click on this transpose button. So when I click on this transpose button, my rows becomes columns and my columns becomes rows. In this case, there is no need to select any column. Okay, just click on transpose. Automatically, all the columns will become rows and the rows will become columns. So when I click on this, you can see you had initially only 3 columns, but now since every row has been converted into columns, that's why you have 27 columns now, and you had 3 columns, that's why you have 3 rows. So rows became columns and columns became rows. Okay, so this step usually is used as intermediate steps. Okay, sometimes I'll give you an example. Sometimes what happens is you have a column which has all the column names, column headers, and in the second column, third column, you have the value. So in such case, what we can do is we can transpose it. So because of the transpose, this entire thing becomes, the first column becomes your column heading, and the column 2, column 3, they become your rows. So like that also you can convert it. So but these type of steps, the transpose steps that I'm showing it to you, or the reverse row steps, they are usually used in between in the sense you are trying to read something else, and in between you are stuck and then you want to do something. Then in that case, you can use this transpose step. Okay, the next function is pivot function. So anybody knows what is pivot? Anyone?
I know for the Excel,
Yeah, the one for the Excel also only I'm asking.
it gives us summarize the data.
Right. So but one thing that happens is whenever you applied your pivot, okay, what happens is if the values of a specific column, they become your new columns, right? So whenever you add anything in the column section in the pivot, those values are taken and new columns are created based on that, right? Exactly same thing happens here when you select this pivot column option. So this pivot column option is given here. So if you consider this data, this has month wise and year wise sales data. Okay, so what I can do is I can take this data and I can create pivot out of it. So if I want to create pivot, I can create pivot on the month column and I can create pivot on the year column. Okay, so let's say I have this year column. Okay, now this year column has 5 unique values: 2017, 18, 19, 20 and 21. So let's say I want to create a pivot, okay, out of this column. So when I create pivot of this specific column, what will happen is I will get 5 new columns: 2017, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Okay, now when I create these columns, I need to arrange my rows. So in order to arrange these rows, I will use this numerical value, sales. So what will happen is it will automatically take this sales value and it will arrange it in the new columns that I've created. Okay, so let me show you this. So this is your output: 3 columns, 61 rows. Now I'll create pivot on this year column. So I click on this year, I click on pivot column. When I click on this here, when I select pivot column, I can select the column, the values which I want to arrange in my new columns. So I will say I want to arrange sales in my new columns. Then I can select this sales and I can click on OK. So when I click on OK, you can see the months are Jan to December, which are around 12 rows. I got 5 new columns: 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and all the sales values are automatically arranged in this new columns. Clear with this? Exactly similar to this, I can create pivot from the month column also. Now, if I create pivot from the month column, what will happen? This month column only has 12 unique values, Jan to December. So when I create pivot on this, I will get 12 new columns. Okay, and in those 12 new columns, I can arrange this sales values. Okay, and based on that, automatically the year would be adjusted. So let me select this and let me click on pivot. Let me select sales as is and I click on OK. So as you can see, your year column is showing only 5 values: 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. But if you see on the right hand side, you have 12 new columns: Jan, Feb, March to December. And all these columns are storing the respective sales value. Okay, so this is possible because of the pivot column functionality. Clear with this? Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, now exactly opposite of this is unpivot. Okay, so let's say if I have a pivot data and if I want to convert it, if I want to get the values out of it, then in that case I can use pivot. So let me show you this. So let's say you have this sales data arranged in the new months, but because of this, what is happening is you are losing out on the year data. Now you don't have your years 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, because they are your column headings. So let's say if I want to extract these column headings and I want to store them in a new column, and the sales value should automatically be arranged there also. So for that, I can use the unpivot option. So in case of unpivot, I have two options. I can either select the columns I want to unpivot, or I can select the column which I don't want to unpivot. So for that, I will first select all the columns from here, 2017 to 2021. I will go to this unpivot and I will say unpivot columns. When I do this, you can see 2 new columns are created. One is called as attribute, the other is called as value. So all the headings, usually they come under the attribute column, and all the sales values, they have come under the values column. Okay, so these are your values. Now same thing I can do it from the other option also. So the other option was unpivot other column. So in case of unpivot other columns, what you have to do is you select the column which you don't want to unpivot. In this case, I don't want to unpivot my month column. So I select this, I go to transform, I select unpivot and I say unpivot other columns. So when I select this, the month column is kept as is, only the other columns are unpivot. Clear with this? So unpivot and pivot are the operations. Now the real use case of this is, let's say I want to create new columns out of my existing column values. Then in that case, I use pivot. But let's say I want to get the values of my headers in a new column. Then in that case, I use the unpivot option. For example, in this case, we wanted to get the year values in the new column. Okay, then in that case we use the unpivot option. Usually unpivot option is used when we are running short of data. Sometimes what happens is we are given only limited fields and we are not able to analyze it, and the header contains certain values. So in that case, what you can do is you can do the unpivot operation, and with the help of unpivot operation you can actually get those column headers in one column, and you can use it in your visualization. So that is also one of the ways of using it. Clear with this? Any questions?
Sir, is Rahul.
Yeah, Rahul.
Yeah. While using a pivot table in Excel, so there are some options available. Means if I want to calculate in sum or in a count, so there is the option available in pivot in Excel. So is there any options available in Power Query?
In pivot it is not available, but there is another option. I'll just show you that. Okay, we'll see that. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So we have an option, Rahul, called as group by. So let's say you have data based on year and sales, so now year and month, and now you want to group the data based on year and month, and you want to calculate average of every sales. You can also do that. Okay, so for that we have a group by operation. I'll show you. Okay, clear with this? Now, similar to this, there was a question which was asked by, I think, Shreya, right? So Shreya asked that usually what happens is in case of nulls, we usually replace the values by arranging them in ascending order, and then we can replace it. So if I want to really do that, I can do that. Let's say I have this table in which I have the data. So let's say I don't sort it. Yeah, I'll just keep it as is. And let's say I want to replace these values, these null values, by the upper value which they have or the lower value which they have. For example, if I have this 110 and this 170. Okay, so in this case, let's say I want to replace the values, okay, with 110 or 170. So for that I have two options given here. One is called as fill up and the other is called as fill down. Okay, so let me show you the output. So I select this column, I say fill down. So when I do fill down, you can see any value, the value which is above the null, it is usually used to replace the null value. So in this case, there were nulls here. You can see these are the nulls, and above null you had 110. So 110 replaced this. Similar to this, here you had 120 above nulls. So all the null values were actually replaced by 120. See, yep. And exactly similar to this is your fill up. So when I do fill up, you can see the replacement is a bit different. So in this case, instead of replacing with 110, the value actually got replaced by 170. So in case of filled up, null, the values below null, below the last null is actually looked, and then that value is replaced with the null cases. Okay, so in data science term we call this as interpolation. Okay, so in interpolation what we do is we have a missing dot here and we have a missing dot here. So then we try to replace them with the last correct value or the first correct value. So that is how your fill up and fill down function works. I hope, Shreya, this is clear now. I think this is what you meant when you asked about the data filling, right? Arranging
Yes.
it. Yeah. Yeah. So like this you can, yeah. So like this you can arrange it, and then you can use the fill up or fill down option. If you want to sort it also, you can do the sorting from here also. That is also possible. Yeah. So this was your fill up and fill down function. Now, what we will do is we'll try to see how we can load the data from the different file formats. So the first file format that we will see is PDF. So in Power BI, we can also load the data from PDFs. Okay, so provided PDF has a table structure, then in that case, I can directly load the data from PDF in the form of table. So let me show you an example. So this is a sample PDF which I have. Okay, in that PDF, I have this table. Yeah. So this is the table. So the heading of the table is data table example PDF image. Then I have an image just below that. And then afterwards, I have this table. So name, position, office, age, start date, and salary. These are the fields that I have within this. So this table starts from page 1 and it goes all the way to page 2. So page 2 also has some data. So let's say if I want to load this, how can I load this? So for that, I have the new source option, and from the new source, I can load it. Okay. So let me click on the new source and click on more. So when I click on new source and more, it will show me the same window like we see in the get data and more. And from there, we select the PDF connector. So from here, we select PDF and click on connect. Okay, so here let me select the PDF which I showed you. So Power BI data sets PDF. So what it will do is it will automatically scan that PDF and it will come up with the list of tables which it thinks we can load. So here I have three options to load. The first option is I can either load page 1. Second option is I can either load page 2, and if I want to load the combined data, then in that case I can load the table which is spanning from table page 1 to page 2. So you can see this is my table which actually starts from page 1. You can see the headers and it goes to page 2. Second option is I can only load page 1. So when you load page 1, you remember page 1 has a title, data table example PDF image, and then followed by image. So if I load this table, I will have to actually do the cleaning. For example, I will have to remove the top 2 rows, then promote the headers, then only I will be able to use the table. Okay. And exactly similar to this, if I want to load page 2, I can load this only page 2 data also. That is also possible. So from here, I will just click on this table 01001, page 1 and 2, and I click on OK. So when I click on OK, the data is directly loaded into your Power Query. Okay. So this is how you can actually load the data from PDF. In PDF, it will always look for table option. Okay. Wherever there are table structures, those tables it will try to identify. Then it is up to you how you want to load those tables and then use it. Okay, clear with this? Any questions?
Sir, if we have multiple tables on different pages, not continuously.
Then you will have option to select those multiple tables and then load them individually. Okay, so they would be separate entities like we had page 1 and page 2, right? So we had one table on page 1, one table on page 2. So like that they would be loaded. And then of course I have another option to load them, so I can load them also. Okay.
How can I get those all in a single table? I mean, in a single query.
Yeah, not in single query. You can do it. Okay, I'll show you this. Anyways, clear with this?
Yes.
Abhi, the next option that we will see is append queries. The append query option is present here. You can see here. So let's say if I have multiple tables, okay, and I want to combine the multiple tables data into one single table. So in that case, we can use the append queries option. So append query is exactly similar to what you do when you have to combine two Excel files. What you do is you open one Excel file, you copy all the data, then you go to open second Excel file, then you go to the end of the second Excel file and then you paste it here, right? That is how the append operation usually works in most of the cases. So exactly similar operation I can do it here with the help of append queries. So when you do append queries, it can combine one or more tables directly. Okay, so for that, let me load two files here. So I'll load one file, text CSV file called as transaction1. So So I have this transaction1.csv with me. I click on OK. Then I will load another file. So this is my transaction1.csv, which has transaction date, customer ID, transaction ID, and amount. Similar to this, I will load another file. So in this case, I select transaction2.csv. So I click on this, OK. And the second table is loaded. Now, if you see carefully, the table or the columns of both the tables are same. So in this case, I have transaction 1, which has transaction date, customer ID, transaction ID, and amount. And I have transaction 2 table, which also has transaction date, customer ID, transaction ID, and amount. The data in transaction 2 table is 134 rows. The data in transaction 1 is 147 rows. Okay. So let's say I want to combine the data of all the tables, okay, both the tables. So here I have an option called as append queries and append queries as new. So what is the difference between append queries and append queries as new? If I want to combine the data in the existing table, okay, then in that case I can use the append queries option. The second option is append queries as new. So when I want to combine two table data and I want to store the output in a new table, then in that case I can select the option as append queries as new. Okay, so let me show you the both options. So first option is append queries. I select transaction 1 table and I click on this append queries option. So when I select this transaction 1 table and when I select this append queries option, since I have already selected transaction 1 table, okay, it is asking me to select the second table. Okay, so I have to select the second table which I want to combine in this existing table. You can see this is already selected. So I have to select the second table. So from here I select transaction 2 and I click on OK. So when I click on OK, what happens is transaction 1 and transaction 2 data is combined and you get the 281 rows. So if you see here, before this step was actually applied, I had 147 rows. After this step was applied, I have 281 rows. Okay, so this is how you can combine the data in the existing table. Now exactly similar to this is your append queries as new. So nothing changes except that a new table is created. So in this case of append queries as new, I click here, I select append queries as new. In this case of append queries as new, it will ask me to select table number 1 and table number 2. Okay, so I'll select first table as transaction 1, second table as transaction 2, and I click on OK. So when I click on OK, what happens is the data of transaction 1 and 2 is combined and it is actually loaded into this new table. Okay, so in this case, you see the output as 281 rows. Transaction 1 and transaction 2 tables are intact. Clear with this? Any questions? I think this is what you were asking, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so like this you can combine the data from any tables. Okay, now what has happened is we have combined the data of transaction 1 and transaction 2 in the append 1 table. Okay, now this is your final table, correct? So if I want to prepare any report, I can directly use the append 1 table. I don't need transaction 1 and transaction 2 since they are merely copies of the own I would say the output table. So in that case, transaction 1 and transaction 2 are my input files and append 1 is my output. So what I want now is I want to load only the output file into Power BI desktop. I don't want to load the transaction 1 and transaction 2 file into my Power BI desktop. So for that, I have been given one option called as enable load. So what I can do is I can right click on the transaction 1 and I can uncheck this box called as enable load. When you uncheck this box, then that specific table is not loaded into Power BI desktop. So I can do the same thing for here. I can click on this enable load checkbox and I can close it. So because of this, what will happen is any data that will come to any changes that will happen in these two files, they will not be loaded in Power Query, but they will be directly sent to your Power BI desktop. Okay, so in this case, these two files are not loaded. Now let me click on File and let me click on Close and Apply. When I click on Close and Apply, observe that transaction 1 and transaction 2 files will not be loaded in Power BI desktop. So let me click on File and let me click on Close and Apply. So you can see in this entire list, there is no mention of transaction 1 and transaction 2 table. Clear with this? Any questions so far, guys and girls? Anurag, Swapnil, Rahul, Shreya, any question?
No, sir.
Yep. Okay. So in this case, you can see there is no transaction 1 table and there is no transaction 2 table here. Okay. So in this case, what you have done is you have actually loaded the output file, which is combination of transaction 1 and transaction 2. Okay, but if any changes happens to your transaction 1 file, or if any rows are added to your transaction 1 file or 2 file, then in that case this output table will get the updates directly. Okay, so let me show you that as well. So you have 281 rows now, you have just checked. Now I will go to that file and I will edit it. So I'll go here. In here I will select the transaction 1.csv file. I will edit it. So this is my data. I have close to 147 rows. So I select the 3 rows from here and I go to the end of the file and I add it. So I have added 3 rows in front of you. I close this file. Now all I will do is I will just click on the refresh in Power BI desktop and my data will be refreshed. So you have 281 rows in the append 1 table, right? Now all I do is I'll refresh this. So in order to refresh just this table, right click on this table and select refresh data. So when you right click on when you select refresh data, only this table is refreshed. Now observe the total number of rows in the append one. Can you see the change?
Yes.
Yeah. So because of that enable load checkbox, what has happened is though the transaction 1 and transaction 2.csv files are not loaded, but their changes are directly loaded to your output file. Okay, to prove my point, what I will do is I will click on report tab. I will click on transform data again. And from here, I will show you the transaction 1 file and transaction 2 file. Okay, so this is your transaction 1 file. See, still showing the old count 147. Transaction 2 it doesn't change, so it is as is. And if you see the append one, it is still not changed because what has happened is whatever rows were added, they actually went to Power BI desktop. They didn't come to Power Query. That is one of the reasons why this is showing as old count. But let's say if you want to load the data in this specific table, then you can select this table and you can click on this refresh preview. So when I click on refresh preview, the selected table is refreshed. So as of now, this table has 4 columns and 147 rows. See what happens now. The 3 rows are detected here after clicking on refresh preview. So after clicking on this 150 rows, so this changed, and because of this change, this table has also changed. So this is also showing you the new 3 rows added. Okay. So this is how the enable load checkbox works. Now, what is the catch here? Why we are using this? Now, for adding 3 rows, 4 rows, 100 rows, 200 rows, it might not make sense. Okay. But imagine that you have huge data coming up. Okay. So in that case, this thing could actually save your time. Okay, let's say if I add 10,000 rows to transaction1.csv file, and let's assume that loading 10,000 rows would take 5 minutes. So if 10,000 rows are added here, and if I don't uncheck that box, what will happen? First, the 10,000 rows would be loaded in the transaction1 table. Okay. Second is, once it is loaded in transaction1, then it will be loaded in the append1 table in Power Query. Okay, so 5 minutes here and 5 minutes here, approximately 10 minutes here. And when you click on close and apply, then the data would be actually loaded into your Power BI desktop. So 5 minutes again. So 5 plus 5 plus 5, 15 minutes is what it is going to take. Okay, but when I uncheck this box, this uncheck box of transaction1, then the data doesn't come to transaction1. If the data doesn't come to transaction1, the data in append1 in Power Query is also not updated. But when you click on close and apply, or when you refresh it, the data directly goes to Power BI desktop. So the total amount of time that it will take is only 5 minutes. So 5 minutes as compared to 15 minutes is what you have achieved. That is why this is also called as one of the performance optimization techniques to load the data into your Power BI desktop. Clear with this? If anyone has any questions, I can repeat what I have said again.
Yes, sir. Can you just repeat it one more time?
Yeah, sure. See, what we are trying to achieve here is a performance optimization technique. Why we are optimizing it? Because loading data sometimes takes a lot of time, right? So let's assume that I have updated 10,000 rows in transaction1 table. So when you update this much amount of data, it is obviously going to take time. So the first thing that will happen is when you click on refresh, the data will actually come to your transaction1 table in Power Query. Once the data is received in transaction1 table in Power Query, then the data would be actually appended in the append1 table in Power Query itself. So time taken for transaction1 plus time taken for append1 table, 2 times it will be done. And once you click on close and apply, then the data actually moves to Power Query, Power BI desktop. So time taken for Power BI desktop. So here the same 10,000 rows will be loaded in 3 different tables. Okay, but you unchecked, because of that unchecking of the box, what will happen now is the data will not change in transaction1 in Power Query, the data will not change in append1 in Power Query, but the data will change in Power BI desktop. So because of this, the data or the delta that is changing, the new rows that are added, they directly go to Power BI desktop. So that leads to time saving and eventually improves the performance of the loading. So that is why this is used. Clear? Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is your append operation. Okay. Now, similar to this, we can do the other operations also. So I'll cover this combine files and merge tomorrow because that will take a lot of time. So the next operation that we will see is we'll try to load the data from different sources. Now in Power Query and in Power BI desktop also, you will see this option which is called as data source setting. So what is this data source setting? So this data source setting stores the settings of your file, whatever files that you have loaded here, it stores kind of the settings related to those files. So this is your PDF, this is your XLSX, this is your CSV, this is the other CSV file that you have loaded. If you want to change the path of the source file, you can click on the change source button and you can change the path from here. Okay, you can specify whether you want to open the CSV file from here, whether you want to change the delimiter, whether you want to split using something else. All those settings you can change it from here. In the same data source setting, you will see global permission. So this global permission is actually storing the list of sources that you have connected to so far, okay, in your Power BI desktop. And in here, it will store their credentials also. Okay. So I wanted to show you this because I'm going to delete something from here. I'll delete this. So if you want to delete something, just click on clear permission and that would be deleted. Yes. Yeah. So the next source that we can connect to is your websites. So let's say I have the list of busiest airports as my website. So this is the website from which I want to load the data. Now this is the Wikipedia page. Now within this Wikipedia page, you have these tables. See for yourself. So 2020, this is the table. 2019, this is the table. 2018, this is the table, and then 2017, and then 2016. Like that, you have different tables present on this website. Now, as part of your reporting, let's say if you want to load this table, so can you load it? Yes. What it will do is it will scan this URL and it will look for all the pages where there are tables. So wherever it can find the table icon, it can load the data from that table. Okay. So let me copy the URL from here. I have copied the URL. Now what I will do is I will go to my Power Query, and in the new source, I will select web. So when I select web, it will ask me for URL. So here I can provide the URL which I want to use. So this is my URL and I click on OK. When you click on OK, the next thing that it will do is it will ask you how to access this website. So usually this is a public website which is available over the web. I can access it freely without providing any user ID and credential. So in that case, I can select this anonymous. But usually when you connect to websites in your corporate organizations, sometimes they are internal pages, sometimes they require authentication. So for authentication purpose, you will have to provide Windows authentication if your organization has your Windows authentication. If you have some other authentication, you can provide from the basic. If you have some token or key, you can specify the keys, or if you have some organization account, you can also provide the organization account details. Since this is a public website, I will select anonymous and I will click on connect. When you click on anonymous and when you click on connect, okay, so in that case, what will happen is it will connect to this website and it will search for all the tables present in this sheet, in this web URL. Okay, so it is scanning now as of now. Okay, you can see 2020 statistics. So when I click on here, I can see the preview of the data. So this is my 2020 data. Similar to this, I have this 2019 data. So here you can see 2019 data, and then 2018 data, 2016, 2017. So anywhere there is a table structure in the HTML, it is detected as table, and you can load that table directly into your Power BI. Okay, so here I will click on these tables and I can click on OK. So when you click on OK, these tables would be loaded to your Power Query, and when you click on close and apply, your tables would be actually loaded to your Power BI desktop. Clear with this? Any questions? Anyone? Any questions? Shreya, Rahul?
No, sir.
Okay. So these are the options that we have seen. So today we have seen the transform tab options. So we have seen the transpose, reverse rows, count rows, pivot column, then unpivot column option we have seen. Then we have seen fill up, fill down option. After that, we have seen how to load the data from PDF, how to load the data from website, and how to combine two tables. So for combining two tables, we have seen two options. One is append queries, second is append queries as new. If you do append queries, the data is appended in the existing table. If you do the append queries as new, then the data is appended in the new table. Okay, so that is the option that we have. The next thing that we saw was the enable load checkbox. So what is the enable load checkbox? When you click on any, when you uncheck the box enable load for any of the table, then that table will not be loaded to Power BI desktop. However, if any data changes in that file, those changes are automatically passed to the output table.